Now we had Provo, Utah, and a man whose posts on social media, particularly Truth Social and Facebook, were absolutely not only violent inducing and threatening, but vile, graphic, and indicative of really a sick mentality. And he's a self-described MAGA Trumpster. That's his own language, even going so far as to emulate Trump's famous blue suit, white shirt, red tie. I mean, wearing a Trump hat all the time, spotted by FBI surveillance there, and then literally being willing to die for that cause. FBI agents coming to visit him in the spring, giving him a chance to say, hey, I'll stop. I didn't mean any of that. That's what they're looking to hear. He didn't do that. He told them, we're done here. Come back with a warrant. And they did, particularly since Biden was hours away from landing in Utah. And again, they tried to negotiate. They gave him commands, refusing to comply, to the point of many news media organizations confirming what I've been told as well, which is that he grabbed a weapon and swung it toward an FBI agent. And that's a sign that we're in this realm of terrorism. What does this sound like? It sounds like my days working international terrorism, where people thought, I'm going to be a martyr. My family
being radicalized.
I'm going to go to paradise for this. Yes. What does that do on a domestic level? It takes away the disincentive to act violently, because up till now, I really don't want to go to prison. I certainly don't want to die. I'll upset my family. All of that. No. The disincentive is gone, and in fact, it's been replaced with an incentive to act out violently. In fact, a recent study in June showed that at least 12 million Americans are A-OK with violence in order to get Trump back into office.
Yeah, it's very alarming, and it's a product, in my opinion, Frank, of the entire right-wing ecosystem. And I say this having been someone who used to abide in that ecosystem very tragically. And while there is a separation between people like me who would never dream of actually engaging in violence and people like Craig Robertson, the Utah man who was just killed, the very tragic fact of the matter is that you have a sympathetic mass of people, like you just described in that poll. There are more and more people who would justify violence. And I think about this, even when I think about January 6th, this is what's so scary, is there are many people who would never show up there with hand ties and flagpoles to beat police officers, but who otherwise are sympathetic to the violent acts because they believe the rhetoric of the lies. They believe that the election was stolen from them. They believe that these Democrats out there are demonic, like Fox News is constantly telling them, and want to burn down our country. And so they've created almost a support system, even among people who do not have extremist tendencies themselves, for the more extreme elements. Frank, I don't even know where to go. You touched on so many threads with that. One of them that I want to circle back to is Trump's harm to his own supporters. You mentioned Ashley Babbitt. She was one of the first to go on one of these, what I would call suicide missions. Craig Robertson this week was another, but there's so much collateral damage that I think Trump supporters out there need to understand. This man is damaging you. He's not damaging your perceived enemies. He's harming you and your families. One thing that I picked up on that story about the FBI shootout this week in Utah, which was so tragic to me, is that Craig Robertson was a woodworker who became radicalized by this propaganda. And he was the sole caretaker for a disabled adult son who also lived in the home and is blind. I mean, this is a human crisis that we have. It's a national security crisis, and it's a human crisis.
Yeah, I mean, you've made a great point here on this topic, generally, of people setting aside their normal inclinations. You're a father. Your disabled son needs you. You shouldn't be doing anything that's going to get you arrested or killed. What are your priorities? Yeah. And we see time after time people setting those aside and saying, no, I've got something bigger to belong to now. And that's a scary moment. It's not only tragic, but it's scary, because once you take away some natural human values, parenting, etc., and you replace them with an ideology that's false and demonizes other people, we can talk about that, because that's a key component. By the way, this is no longer about political differences. This is not left versus right, Democrat versus Republican. This is terrorism, and and it's cult-like, and it's terrorist-like, and it involves radicalization processes. And so when that happens, that's a sign that we've lost control of a group. Is it all Republicans? Of course not. Of course not. As you said, you would never get to that place. But so many people now have nothing else going on. They found their affirmation online, particularly during the quarantine of the COVID pandemic, in people they've never met before, maybe halfway around the globe. Now that's their affirmation. This has become their identity. I wear the hat proudly. I go to the rallies. I spend all my money, which is getting pocketed and going who knows where. That you've supplanted values. And that's called the demonizing of the other, inciting people to violence against people you think are now subhuman, is something called stochastic terrorism.